Hi, today is August 26, 2025. Welcome to episode 32 of the Krishnamurti podcast with Sam Yogi. In this podcast, we shall continue from where we left off or a little before that. And it was a Q&A or a question and answer session from the second talk at Ommen, Holland on July 28, 1933. So the question that was asked, J. Krishnamurti, is as follows. I have found that in the process of getting rid of personal barriers, one feels the urge for self discipline. Yet you say that you do not believe in self discipline. What do you mean by self discipline? And K or Krishnamurti gave a long answer, and let's look at the second part of this answer. Look to the lack of understanding that demands self discipline and not to the best method of discipline. You are one thing today and another thing tomorrow. You are different today from what you will be tomorrow. Yet the mind is forcing and twisting itself to follow a certain rule, and thereby you are creating a conflict. Thus, there is never completeness in action that true fulfillment. Consistency involves memory. It involves the remembrance of a certain ideal, a certain pattern which is predetermined based on self protection and on fear. The memory of that which is already dead disciplines you. Now, if you are constantly acting in accordance with that memory, how can you live spontaneously or follow the swift wanderings of truth? Okay, let's look at this little part again. Consistency involves memory. It involves the remembrance of a certain ideal, a certain pattern which is predetermined based on self protection and on fear. The memory of that which is already dead disciplines you. Now, if you are constantly acting in accordance with that memory, how can you live spontaneously or follow the swift wanderings of truth? There must be the understanding of the significance of the desire to be consistent, the cause, before abandoning self discipline, the result. Okay, so here K challenges the pursuit of consistency and self discipline when rooted in fear and memory. K argues that clinging to ideals, patterns, and the authority of the past prevents the mind from fully meeting the present moment. Consistency becomes a shelter from the unknown. a way of forcing today's living into yesterday's mold. This reliance on memory and rules creates inner conflict, suppresses spontaneity, and obstructs the wholeness of true action. Real freedom and fulfillment arise not from discipline but from understanding the fear and desire for consistency itself. Okay, let's continue with case answer and see what case says next. Because one does not meet every incident of life wholly, there arises conflict which creates memory. Mind identifies itself with this suffering, out of which it creates for itself a self protective principle, and by this measure, all experiences are judged and controlled. It is in suffering only that the mind tries to escape, consciously or unconsciously, to the pattern, and from this there arises the defensive I must or I must not. If you can discern the cause of fear which brings forth these self protective ideals which demand consistency and the rigid following of a discipline, then without the effort of overcoming the fear, the mind will free itself from it. Okay, so let's see what actually case says here. Let's summarize this answer so far. Case says or he examines the psychological roots of consistency, self discipline, and memory. He shows that the mind, unable to meet life's experiences wholly in the present, falls into conflict. This conflict leaves behind memory, and from memory arises suffering. The mind identifies with this suffering and, in an effort to protect itself, builds principles and ideals through which it judges and controls all future experience. Out of this movement are born rules, the defensive dictates of I must and I must not. Consistency then is not a sign of clarity but a refuge for a mind burdened by yesterday. The pursuit of discipline is sustained not by freedom but by fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of insecurity, fear of meeting life without shelter. This fear, which grows out of suffering, creates the compulsion to cling to memory, to ideals, and to authority. Yet, these very mechanisms bring division and conflict, forcing the present into the mold of the past. So, K suggests that wholeness in action is only possible when one discerns this cycle directly. How incomplete living leads to conflict, conflict to memory, memory to suffering, and suffering to fear. With the clear seeing of this process, there is no need to struggle against discipline or fear. for the compulsion toward them dissolves on its own. In that freedom, the mind can meet life freshly without conflict or without conflict or dependence on the dead weight of the past. So we end the podcast here. There is another part to K's answer, and with that, the answer to this question will be complete, and we will cover that answer tomorrow or the next episode, which will be episode 33. Thank you. You have a nice day.